Hey, Doug Walker here. I just got out of an early screening of the movie Hereditary. This has been getting a lot of buzz. It's like, kind of the scariest movie of the year, and it's super well written, well directed, well acted, everything, and it's super disturbing, uncomfortable, and, yeah, that's about it. Man, this movie was rough. It's very well acted. It's super creepy. I can't recall a movie where, I kind of breathed heavily during it. After a scene was over, a scene or two, I would just go, whew. I really need to kind of catch my breath. But what's interesting about it is that some people, everyone I think will kind of get what they're looking for, but there's a very distinct kind of separation between the first half and the second half. I feel like people are either gonna love the first half more than the second half, or love the second half more than the first half. I'll get to that in a bit. This is spoiler free. The most I can say about it, because the least you know going in, the better, is that it's about a death in the family and the things that happen after that. That's really the most I should say. In terms of the film itself, in terms of the mood and the tone, I think one of the reasons it works so well is that the first half of this is really just creating this unbelievably uncomfortable, disturbing feeling of dread. I mean, just this absolute... That's the only word I can use. It's just dread. You're just watching it, and like I said, after so many of these scenes, I just would take a breath because it is just so uneasy. And there's so many scenes, particularly in this first half, where I'm just, you kind of don't want to watch it. And it's not, yeah, there is some gore, but that's not particularly even the reason why. It's just these performances with this family and what they talk about and how they talk about it. To me, in many respects, is kind of the scariest part of the movie. I mean, it's not like a boo or anything like that, but it's just watching this family interact off each other after this death, and it's just, you feel it. I mean, you just feel like you're in the room listening to them say just these, awful but truthful things. It's one of the few times where... you always say to don't keep things bottled up, communicate and stuff like that. But I mean, with this, I'm like, no, you guys probably shouldn't be saying half of what you're saying. But it doesn't feel quite exploitive. It just walks that tightrope of not quite being like an exploitation movie. For the first half. Second half is a little bit of a different story, but again, it still works. The best comparison I can draw to this is that it's kind of like a mix between Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist. Now that's high praise, clearly. It's not as good as either of those, but it has a very similar feel, where the reason the scares in the second half work as well as they do, because the movie doesn't really turn straight up horror until roughly the second half, but the reason it works so well is because it creates this environment where you are just so uneasy, and it feels real. And because of that, you feel like you're with them more in these scenes when the scary stuff starts happening. Because if this movie sort of started off with the stuff that happens in the second half, kind of in the first half, like a lot of horror films do, it wouldn't have worked as well. It had to really create this really just disturbing environment. So with that said, there is a very distinct... separation between the first half and the second half. Like there are clues being set up and everything, but the first half is very much a super slow-moving, uncomfortable family. I don't want to say drama because there are horror elements to it, but it's mostly watching this family interact off each other and just this incredibly uncomfortable, unnerving way. And then the second half goes much more traditional horror. And it's done well. It's done very, very well. But in my opinion, it kind of, like I said, people are going to love the first half more. They're going to love the second half more. I like the first half more because everything was a little bit more vague. You didn't quite know what was going on, but it was just enough that it kept you interested. And you questioned constantly, who's crazy here? Who isn't crazy? Who has their head together and who doesn't? because just suddenly these things are thrown at you that are so strange and so odd, and you're not sure if it's legit or not, but then when you see certain things starting to move and starting to happen, you're like, well, wait, maybe it is. But for some people, they might be going in saying, well, yeah, I know it's going to be real, or I know that shit's gonna happen. It's a horror film, so why don't we get to that faster? But for me, I think because I've seen that so many times in horror films, I feel like this starts off as a great movie, and then it becomes a good horror film. Because for me, when they start explaining what's going on, I felt like I personally didn't need that. I just, because there were little clues in the opening sort of indicating what was going on. And when you see it all kind of come together at the end, I did realize, I'm like, man, for the family dynamic that was going on, what it amounts to really did not connect much to what they were building up with the family, like why we were watching them go through as much as they were going through. But it could very well be that they're just setting up the second half, which, you know, again, is sort of giving you the answers and explaining what's going on, which is still good. It's not, by no means bad. And these performances just sell it. I mean, these are just amazing performances, and it's so well directed. And I don't know, maybe I need to see it again. Maybe I need to... I am going to see it again, actually. I'm going to take my wife to it. And it's one of those films where it's like, I think I want to watch it and see if there is more of a connection with the second half to the first half, because I felt like there wasn't much, particularly when it ended. I was saying, well, that was very disturbing, very creepy, but I was like, man, that was a different movie in the second half. Like, a good movie, but that did not feel like what the first half was building up to. Which, again, you could say, well, kind of a surprise and catches you off guard, which it does. But it's one of those things where I feel like if they kept it more vague, I probably could have drawn more connections to what the family was going through with the horror elements. Because what I love about the first half and kind of the middle is that the horror imagery really reflects what's going on with these characters emotionally. Like, one of the characters sleepwalks, and so half the time you don't know if you're watching, you know, this character really do something terrible, or if it's just in her mind, or she's sleepwalking. And half the time the other characters don't know too, because they start having bad dreams too, and then suddenly she'll just be in the room, you know, with like the son or something like that, and the son's like, what are you doing here? You were trying to do this, and she's like, no, you're dreaming, it's not true. Now, let me tell you about this other crazy thing that's going on in her life. And again, that's the brilliant part of this movie, is when you don't know who's in their right mind, or are they all out of their minds, and this is all from, you know, this death that happens. So that's the absolute brilliant stuff. I think that the first half and the middle is just like, I mean, like, one of the great horror films, in my opinion. And when you get to the end, it becomes a really good horror film, but not one of the greats, in my opinion. But again, I'm wondering if I need to see it again. I'm wondering if there is more of a connection that maybe I didn't see. Because there is stuff set up in the first half to give you clues to what the third act is going to be. But just emotionally, I felt like this is not where it should have gone. Like, it should have gone maybe in a different direction. Like, definitely a scary direction, don't get me wrong, or messed up direction. But yeah, I felt like when they start doing the thing where it's like, oh, I looked through these books and I found this, and I found out that this character is doing this thing, and I found out that, like, that's feeling like a movie. And this film was so good, it was just feeling like this disturbing, uncomfortable experience that you were just witnessing. You know, it's kind of like the closest I felt to being in watching a play, where when a play is really good, you just feel like you're just watching these people unfold and their emotions unfold before you, and they're really right there. I mean, this movie was getting so good, it just felt like these characters were right there, and you were in the room with them. So I think when you get to the last third, like I said, people are either gonna love that because they're gonna get answers, or they're gonna sort of be pushed away a little bit because it just becomes a horror movie. A good one, a really good one, but it goes from a great experience to a good horror movie. So I'm really curious what people are going to think about that. My guess is everyone, after seeing this, they're gonna like you know how people are saying, I see dead people after Sixth Sense. I feel like everyone's gonna be going, after this, because it becomes the scariest goddamn sound in this movie. So even like kind of the traditional, you know, I'm sure people are wondering, is this like a monster film where there's a lot of jump scares and stuff like that? There are a lot of traditional horror elements and scary music and stuff, but there's not too much of like the chun, you know. There's definitely nothing where someone just puts their hand on someone, it's like, chun, it's just me. There's none of that bullshit, none of the fake outs, at least not that I remember. Cause, I mean, most people hate that and they groan, but I mean, for the most part, people watching this, whenever there's like just a scary scene going on, there's kind of that nervous laughter, like, and whenever something really uncomfortable or disturbing happened in the first half, people were just, I mean, like, it got the reaction it was supposed to get. So like I said, going into this, I think you have to know this is, while it is a scary movie, and there are sort of the traditional paranormal scary movie elements to it, it does get rough, particularly in the first half. And I think when it's really fantastic, when it's really just phenomenal, is when the emotions the characters are going through are being reflected in the horror imagery. I think that's when it's just primo, like, well, one of the best horror films I've seen in years. I mean, just, it makes you so uncomfortable, and I do not scare easy. Honestly, I can probably count on two hands how many, like, really great scary horror films I've seen. I mean, I just don't scare easy. And this one really was getting under my skin. I mean, this was really creating an environment that was just so uncomfortable and so unnerving, and it just knew how to use the music and knew when to go quiet. And these performances were just so good too. I mean, like I said, they just totally suck you in. So I really like it. If you're looking for a traditional kind of like just boo horror film, I mean, you do get that eventually, and it's done very, very well, but you gotta wade through a lot of emotion, a lot of character, which I love. I love that stuff even more. And if you're looking for that, you know, the more character in your horror film, that is definitely there too. You might be pushed back a little bit by the ending. Because like I said, it's by no means bad. But sort of the brilliant steps that it had in the first half and in the middle go down a little bit to become a traditional horror film. In fact, honestly, there's a few scenes in here when they're explaining what's going on. Most of the time you don't see the person talking, explaining it, or like they're showing close-ups of books and stuff like that. So I'm kind of wondering if that was put in later, because it kind of felt like it. Like I said, it was becoming, the last half, particularly last third, becomes more of a movie instead of this very unique experience. But it's still a good movie. So I got nothing but high praise for this movie. This is just a really uncomfortable, creepy, unsettling film. And I think, I don't know, I think a lot of people are going to see it. They're going to be talking about it. Some are going to be turned off by either the first half or the second half. But there's at least one half of a movie you're gonna love. That's what I'm taking out of it. I like the whole thing, but I think everyone's gonna love one half of the movie, whether it's the first half or the second half. So I definitely really, really recommend go seeing it. I think it's a good, creepy movie. I don't know if it's a good, you know, take your date horror film, because like I said, I mean, it is really rough, particularly the first half, but yeah, I still highly, highly recommend it if you're a fan of scary movies or any kind of just uncomfortable movie going experience, which I know that's a weird thing. Like, why would you want to go and see an uncomfortable movie? But I mean, this does it well, and it's artistically well done, and visually it's wonderful, and there's sort of some nice imagery and symbols with like going into the dollhouse and stuff like that. Like even the opening shot, it kind of gives you that feeling of like there's manipulation going on and stuff, and they're all kind of puppets and dolls. It's just, it's so good. It's really, really good. So definitely go check it out. I thought it was wonderful. Get the shit scared out of you, and